Giatzidis. I am participating in the Veterans History Project. Today is Wednesday, June the 16th, 2004. We are at the Atlanta History Center in Atlanta, Georgia. Would you give me your name in full, your birth date, and birthplace?
I'm William H. Brotherton, Jr., born April 20th, 1917, in Dallas, Texas.
All right. And tell us something, were you raised in Dallas, Texas?
Yes, for the most part, I grew up in Dallas. Yes.
Tell me about growing up in Dallas.
Well, it was a great place at the time. And I went to Terrell School, which was a school my father had attended.
And your father's name?
William H. Brotherton,
Okay.
Sr. And I was the first son alumnus to
You need to stop for a minute. We're going to go on and start talking about your military career.
Yeah.
Can you tell me, did you enlist or were you drafted?
You know, the summer of 1941, the draft, which had been passed a year before, was about to expire, and the people who were drafted actually thought they were going to get out. And Congress, by one vote, extended the draft, so that took care of that. And so I decided to go into the Navy because I could be drafted in the Army for $20 a month. And the Navy made me an offer of $72. So that was a fairly easy decision there. And in fact, the story is even a little bit longer than that. I'd been recommended for a commission coming out of civilian life, but because I had astigmatism in the right eye, I couldn't qualify. So I found out I could go in as an enlisted man, and they wouldn't hold that against me. And so that way I got in, because the draft was not about to hold up. And I couldn't go in the Army and think that the Army was going to let me out to join the Navy, that kind of stuff. So I went ahead and, on the advice of some of my good friends who spent a year in the military down in South Texas, in the mud flats of Texas, whatever you do, don't get in the Army. So
what year was this?
This was about September of 41.
September 41.
Yeah, like I said, the commission deal fell through because of the astigmatism, so I went ahead and signed up in Dallas, and then went out to the receiving station in San Diego, of course, big receiving station, destroyer base and all that sort of thing.
And what did you do in San Diego?
Well, I went in as a yeoman second class, which is a petty officer rating, kind of like in the Army, a non-commissioned, whatever, and second class. So immediately they put me to work in the office there, typing up beneficiary slips. So my job when the fellows came in was to get their beneficiary. And of course, I don't mind telling you, a lot of them almost panicked when I asked who their beneficiary. They want to know, why am I going to be long for this world or not? I said, well, don't worry. I said, in World War I, hardly anybody in the Navy got hurt, you see. But this is, it gets real funny this time. So, but a lot of the fellows I signed up, by the way, on that, all ended up on the Arizona, which is terrible. So, anyway, so I had this. In fact, one of the great delights that I gave the chief yeoman there, I told him about my attempt to get a direct commission, you know, and they all think it's a joke because here's a man who had stripes, been there 12 years, and he just got to be a chief yeoman here I was talking about. So it gave him a great deal of pleasure when he got a letter from the Navy Department that said I wasn't eligible as a civilian. I was eligible, but in the Navy, I was not eligible. And so it tickled him quite a bit. I mean, because he thought, boy, we'll show this reserve. So our ship, the USS Sumner, which had come around from the East Coast, it was a special duty ship, which had been originally built as a believe it or not, as a sub-tender. When subs were so small, they had a long bow, they were even able to draw the keel of the bow up of the sub under that. So it looked like a yacht. See, a lot of people thought it was J.P. Morgan's yacht or something like that. So they came around to San Diego and they needed a yeoman. I think they needed a yeoman first class, but you know, what's the one? So
what are the duties of a yeoman?
Well, it's administrative. Yeah, call it personnel administrative. You work in the ship's office. I couldn't have asked for a better job. In other words, when they were going to enlist me, they were offering me to be a storekeeper or a yeoman. And I said, what do they do? When they told me they were going to say I could be a second-class storekeeper or a third-class yeoman. I said, well, I'll take the third class because I knew that I would like that work better than being a storekeeper because it's the heart of the ship. In other words, you know everything that's going on. You handle all the personnel, all that sort of thing. It turned out to be a wise decision because later on I became a personnel officer, and then you really are. You get a little stature, you get a little respect at that time because you control all the orders. When people come in, they have to come to you, and they leave it.
All right, so tell me about this first, I'm sorry, the name of the ship?
Yeah, USS Sumner. So they put me aboard that. And of course,
tell me about that.
Well, I didn't know anything. See, I was the biggest landlubber that ever came. I made all the mistakes. I called the deck the floor. I called the overhead the ceiling, the bulkheads. I called the wall. You know, it was kind of a joke around the ship. You know, this stupid guy comes aboard. See, about 80% of the personnel were regulars, and you had a few reserves like me, but they didn't have one as stupid as I was. Well, see, on the trip out to San Diego, here's when things really got serious, is when we started having these drills, these general quarters drills. You turn all the lights off, and then you put on this special clothing. They said, what's this clothing for? Well, the ship catches on fire. So it was quite a little introduction there. Even before we got to thinking about burning up.
All right, well, tell me, was it a suit, was it a jacket?
It's special clothing. It's heavy clothing. They got a name for it. You know, I don't know what they call it, Bill, stuff they put on.
So a call to general quarters, what is the first thing you would do?
Well, general quarters is battle stations.
Oh, okay.
And you found out where your battle station was. Well, since I was in the ship's office, and a yeoman, fortunately, I had a battle station on the ship's bridge right by the commanding officer. In other words, when he wanted to communicate with the ship through the intercom, well, then I was the one, I repeated whatever he said, and, you know, it came back. So I found out, you know, what I was supposed to do, and so, but I tell you, it was real creepy. And during these drills, the reason these drills were important is what contributed to our success. On December 7th, we shot down 2 planes because we moved the ammunition from the below decks, the magazine,
So you learned during the drills to move the ammunition.
Yeah, well, the crew did that, but see, we knew then the ammunition. See, that was considered. Well, that was part of the drill. You see, well, when we got to Pearl, because we were kind of independent, we were operating really under the hydrographic office administratively, and we didn't have anybody looking over our shoulder. We were supposed to put that ammunition back in the magazine.
All right, now you said that your mission was, I'm sorry, hydro what?
Hydrographic. In other words, we did charting. See, we had small boats aboard. We'd go into an area, which we did later on, go out, chart the harbors. They'd go out and using lead lines and get bearings, bring the information back to the ship. We had hydrographic engineers aboard. We were a floating hydrographic office. They'd bring these bearings back. They would record them, and then they would print these charts up. See, every harbor in the world has a chart, at some time or another. And then they would send a special seaplane in to distribute it among the fleet. So we turned out literally hundreds of thousands of charts, which is pretty important.
So are you sailing directly from San Diego to Pearl on this boat?
On this ship, yeah.
Okay.
And we had 2 or 3 drills on the way, naturally. And of course, the key thing was we put the ammunition topside, and then when we got there, they just never did bother to put it below decks, which if we had, would have made a big difference. And so that when we got to Pearl, see, that's Hawaii was a mad place with all the Navy in there, you see, and we saw the whole fleet. See, Roosevelt had to get an admiral that would permit him to put all the ships in one place so the Japs could get at them. See, that he was using us as bait. See, we were turned out to be bait.
Of course, when did you arrive in Pearl?
Well, it was about 2 weeks before the attack. See, it was December 7th. We got into the latter part of April. See, it took about, it took a week or so coming out for a week or 10 days.
So what was Pearl like? Did you live on the ship?
Well, I slipped into the ship's office. I didn't have to go anywhere. I had the best deck below. I slept in the ship's office, and I went up topside for general quarters. So my life was controlled by the bosun's pipe. Have you ever been aboard a Navy ship? Beep, beep. Turn to, it tells you what to do, what's going on. So I had that was a pretty good setup. And so we got out there on that particular morning, and I had breakfast on the mess deck, which was just below the main deck.
You're talking about December 7th?
Yeah, this one getting December 7th now.
Okay.
And someone had said that there seemed to be a lot going on outside, and so I got up and went up to the main deck and started. We were tied up in the sub base at Pearl, berth 13. I think it's right here. And here we are, I think, right there. Do you see the Sumner? Mm-hmm. Yeah, right. We were tied up at berth 13.
I'll take what?
It is, Lillian, like see where it says submarine base? The Sumner's right, just so you can see where to go, right above that word.
And while you've got it, this says this is the Nevada, Arizona,
that was Battleship Row.
California. Battleship Row is right here.
That was Battleship Row.
The Naval Air Station, submarine base, and Navy Yard.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then something you didn't notice were fuel tanks. See, we got several breaks on. You need to.
No, I've got it. You can point to the map.
Yeah. See when these planes came in, the torpedo planes, they came in such a way that we were tied up, and we didn't have to do a thing but fire. If you had the nerve to fire. And of course, I think the fellow, Red Camel.
I'm sorry, the name again?
A fellow named Red Camel, who was the gun captain on that 3-inch gun. See, we had 3-inch guns, and we went back to the fantail for 0800. Everybody in the military knows that at 0800 you have color. So we're sitting there slitting. These planes are going by. And of course, at first we thought they were our planes and just didn't pay attention. With the fellow in charge, who'd been in the Asiatic fleet, he knew a jet plane when he saw one. So he says, he gave the verbal command. Up to that time, there'd been no general alarm. It's incredible how far this thing went before anybody woke up. He said, those are not our planes; those are Jap planes, general quarters. And, so I knew what that meant. So and then finally the ship came alive, and they started to clang. So I got up on the bridge, and just as I got up on the bridge and turned around, this fellow Red Camel, I have to give him credit, because he didn't have anybody to tell him what to do, but he was there, and he fired, and he had a direct hit. I mean, that plane just exploded in midair. It was a beautiful sight because we felt pretty stupid, when all of a sudden we have to digest the fact that we're under attack from Japan right here in Pearl Harbor. I mean, we thought, my God, how bad can it get? But Red went ahead and fired, and as it turned out, he was the only guy on the ship that got hurt because this gun, there was something to do with the mechanism, but he was courageous enough to put his elbow in there to boost it along, and he ends up getting a broken elbow out of it. So he hit that direct, and then a few minutes later, another one, which had already been hit, he finished it off. So we take credit for 2 planes. So here we are, a non-combat ship. See, that's the service duty ship, and we're shooting down planes when the battleships, for the most part, didn't even have. I told you the rule, the Navy regulation. You were not supposed to have ammunition topside in peacetime. See, that was it. Everybody's afraid somebody's going to start something. So you had ship after ship after ship, all ships all around us. None of them were firing because the ammunition was below decks. The guy that had the key to the locker, he's probably out on a picnic. See, that was Sunday morning. A lot of people had gotten up at 6 and 7 in the morning and hit the beach. They'd gone on liberty. So from that was pretty much it, because Red did the biggest thing for us. He shot the 2 planes down, and then the day went by, and of course we didn't know. In the meantime, the one thing I could see from that ship's bridge were these fuel tanks. And I thought, well, why haven't they hit the fuel tanks? They're hitting the air, why don't they hit the fuel tanks? Well, since that was my first war, I didn't know they always hit the fuel tanks last. Of course, I didn't know then they had a 3-range plan. They were coming in on 3 waves, and the fuel tanks were put on the 3rd wave. See, well, as it turned out, thank God, if they'd hit the fuel tanks, I wouldn't be here. That'd be the end of that. But since because everybody has his own theory as to why they cut off after two waves. In 2 waves, they disabled every one of our battleships and did something to all the airfields. So the Jap Admiral, and only lost 29 planes. Those 2 planes we shot down were 2 out of 29. I mean, it just shows you how little was going on. And they had 350 planes. So that, something was working right for us. So the Jap Admiral, I mean, if I were in his shoes and I only lost 29 planes, I've disabled, their main objective originally was to disable our battleship fleet. Well, they disabled it. Well, why are we hanging it? What are we waiting for? Because our carriers were not in there. They were hoping our carriers were there, and they wanted to know where our carriers were, but they had no way of finding out just where our carriers were. It turned out they showed up the next day. So anyway, that admiral wasn't going to take any chance because they would not have been able to get back to Japan if our carriers showed up and sank their carriers. So he called the whole thing off. Well, of course, that saved us not losing the fuel tanks and us getting caught with it. So we had a feeling without knowing what was going on that we'd missed something. I mean, I thought this battle has ended too darn quick, but it did. And so then all we did was the next...
finish that day for me.
December 7th?
December 7th, early morning, you all have shot down 2 planes. Do you spend the rest of the day on deck?
Yeah. Well, you stayed at General Quarters.
Stayed at General Quarters?
Yeah, you stayed at General Quarters from hell freezes over.
And then... but you didn't know what else was going on around you. You couldn't. Not
too much. Well, we could see the Arizona burning.
Uh-huh.
We could see certain. We knew that there's a lot of some of them were getting hurt. We knew we'd gotten off light as far as being hurt.
Could you tell the difference between the 2 waves? You all participated in the first wave.
Yeah. Actually,
the second wave.
Actually, the first wave is the one we took action in.
Yeah.
We just know there was a second wave because we could see the planes. Well, some of them kind of flew by us. Some of them, I think, were taking pictures or something like that. I don't know. But we just knew that there was 2 waves, and that was the end. And that really kind of surprised us. We thought, well, something's missing here, and of course we didn't know that the third wave had been planned. So we just, from then on, while we were...
You just stayed at General
Well,
Quarters?
stayed at General Quarters. They had all kinds of rumors going out. The Japs, they said they were going to have some Jap transports off of Barber's Point. They were going to poison the water. They were going to go on to the West Coast.
How were you getting these rumors?
Well, they fly, I don't know, they come out of the air. And I was all the time, I was thinking about Bunker Hill. I don't know why I thought about Bunker Hill. I realized I was in a historic.
So you knew at that point that this was going to be an historic day?
Oh, yeah, sure. I knew. My God, surprise attack with the Japs. I knew it was a memorable occasion, but I never worried about whether we would survive or whether we'd win the war.
Something you used to always, when you tell the story, this is Mimi talking, you would talk about how you'd come out and how you looked out and you saw the Jap plane and it was so close you felt like you could just reach out and touch it. And then also tell about you looking out and the view that you saw when the ships were burning.
Yeah. Well, these planes that were coming in, they were actually looking at us and grinning. Kind of insolently, and we were standing there saluting, and they could assume that we were saluting them, of course, which we weren't. We were saluting the colors. But of course, that ended pretty quick, and that's when we went to General Quarters. Well, up from the bridge, I could see the pandemonium that was going on around the harbor. I mean, I could see the Arizona, I could see that whole row of battleships there, California and a whole bunch of them. I could see all that, so I knew that we had gotten off light, and I understood why, because we were not important enough to be a target. So I like to tell people the way to survive a battle is don't be a designated target. If you're so far down that you don't make the list, why, you probably will survive.
Would it be too painful to talk about what you were seeing?
Well, I'd rather not.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't want to get into that.
All right. Now, you had started...
Well, the idea, and I can't stand it.
We don't need to talk about that. What I'd like to... You had, in fact, I sort of changed tracks on you a little bit earlier. You were getting ready to talk about the next day.
Well,
we talk about the next day.
Well, yeah. Well, the days from then on were everybody sitting tight. We didn't know what was going to happen next. We didn't know whether it was going to be more attack on us or what. And of course, our carriers showed up, and that made us feel good. And so we knew that things were going to somehow work out. So we sort of guesstimated that they had done their thing and hopefully gone on back to Japan.
The speech that Roosevelt gave, did you all hear that? Did you get it secondhand? How did you?
Well, don't bring up Roosevelt.
All right. That's fine.
He insisted on putting us in harm's way, so that was his way of getting in the war. See, Roosevelt, I hate to say it, was a closet communist, and he got in the war to help Stalin. The Russians were running our foreign policy then. And of course, Churchill wanted us in too. But Stalin had to have us because he would never have been able to withstand Hitler without us. And of course, England needed the help all along. But Roosevelt actually thought that Stalin had hit on something by letting the government spend money and run the life. So he thought that he was following Stalin's lead at that time. So the war was really to make the world safe for communism.
All right. What did you do in the next days? Did you ever get off at General Quarters, or were you still
hardly
on
ever
the bridge?
Well, what to do?
How long did you stay?
What to do? They set a watch schedule. See, after that, finally after General Quarters, then you go on a watch schedule, so that you. Oh yeah. Well, every morning at daylight, 2 hours before and 2 hours after. In the evening, 2 hours before sunset, 2 hours after. So you spent 4 hours at General Quarters because the attacks usually come early in the morning or late at night. And then you have your general station, watch station on top of that. So you had 8 hours, and then you had 4 hours, that's 12 hours. And then, of course, you had a job aboard the ship. I worked in the ship's office. I had, things to do there. So I was busy all the time, and I never did, in fact, I never did get enough sleep, I think, for about a year and a half.
Well, what sort of things were you doing? What were your duties? Can you give us an example?
Well,
of something
running
you might
around
do
the ship.
during the day?
See, our main thing was communication. We worked under the direction of the executive officer, and he always had something he wanted to do. Some orders to type up, go here, go there, whatever. But we were kind of chasing around. It wasn't anything life-threatening or anything like that. But hey, where's my water? Yeah, here's my water right here. So things were pretty quiet. See, once they withdrew, then we were just sitting waiting to see what was going to happen next. Well, because we were the type ship we were, by that I mean not a combat ship, but could serve a purpose, they included us in the first task force to leave Pearl after the attack. And so they had the idea of taking Marines out to the different bases. In fact, there's a fellow in Gainesville right now, Mac Abbott, who turned out to be a Marine passenger on one of the destroyers. See, we didn't normally, later on, we never did get an escort. We were just supposed to luck it out but we did have escorts. When we did something like this, part of a task force, we'd have destroyers as escorts. So our idea was to go to Wake, I think it was. Well, it turned out the Japs got there first. So then they changed us in midstream to go to an island called Palmyra, which nobody ever heard of before or since.
Can you spell that?
Palmyra, Palmyra. So we go to Palmyra. Well, on that trip, then we became a designated target. Very definitely, very muchly. You had a Jap sub. It was a wonderful place for sub to sit and wait outside a harbor full of ships, because they had to know where they could go was out, and they had to come out sometime. So they kind of followed us on this trip. So this is when they had a torpedo with our name on it, is the expression we used. And but unfortunately, their bureaucracy, I guess, interfered, just like our bureaucracy interfered with us having ammunition topside. Somehow they had rigged their rangefinder only for big ships, deep ships that go way down in the water. And I don't know whether obviously they didn't have the control to come to our level. We were just a small ship floating on top of the water. So they fired, and it missed us. And this was their death warrant, because it showed up on the other side, and you had 2 destroyers out there, and that was their job, was to see torpedoes running around in the water, figure out where they came from, and get on top of them with depth charges. So that destroyer sent us a message that said, sub last seen at a 90-degree. So they sank the sub. In fact, the skipper of that destroyer, I think, got the Navy Cross for sinking that sub. So that made things kind of interesting.
When was this? What time of year? What are we talking about?
Well, it was the latter part of December. See, our trip, we left Pearl about 2 weeks after the 7th, so it was sometime in there before that, in the end of the year. Okay. And we were going down to Palmyra and bringing back. In fact, this guy, Mac Abbott, he got dropped off at that time. It was like, you've seen these cartoons of just a little island with a tree on it. That's about.
That's where he got dropped off.
You can see water all the way around it, and I thought, thank God I'm not a Marine, because they dropped him on. I think he stayed 6 months there before they finally picked him up and moved him somewhere else. But anyway, I had many reasons to be grateful that I was aboard ship, because I always had a place to sleep. I had my food. I didn't have too much to complain about, as long as I didn't mind general quarters and watch duty and all that sort of thing. So we made that trip back to Pearl, and then we were stuck there doing different things, getting ready to do our regular duty, which was doing surveying. And so our first survey job was at a famous place, well, a lot of people know about it now, that invent Bora Bora, and in the Society Islands. And our skipper was a Mustang, a man who'd come up out of the ranks, and his executive officer was an academy man. So the Mustangs in the academy are always like this, you know.
Do you remember their names?
Truitt, Captain Truitt, I.W. Truitt, was a skipper in Phillips, was the exec, and they took turns trying to figure out to make our life miserable. But the skipper, the Truitt, they didn't know whether that Bora Bora at that time, see, the war was just getting warming up, and you had two kinds of French. So all that was controlled by France. So they didn't know whether it was Free French or Vichy French. Because Free French was our kind of French, the Vichy was the other kind of French. So Truitt had decided that they were not going to take his ship. I mean, if he got down there and it turned out he was overpowered or something, so he had the gunner's mate line our stern, our bow, the whole backbone of the ship, with dynamite, because he was going to blow that ship up before he let the enemy have it. See, of course, we didn't find all this out until later, and we just kind of put it down as eccentricism. And when we got down there wasn't anything there. It was just like a tropical island. You had, you know, girls doing the hula hula. In fact, we even went over at nighttime, you know, to watch the show. It was like something out of Hollywood. I mean, in fact, the Bora Bora was, for that book that was written about South Pacific, for example, Valley High, they were talking about Bora Bora because they had a peak on there that had a tendency to look like it was water, but it looked like snow. So here it almost looked as though you had a snow-capped peak in the South Seas. I mean, it's just a fantastic place. And I've talked to people up there in Gainesville who had their honeymoons down there. So I know it's a wonderful place. So anyway, that trip turned out to be nothing to that. Now there, even though I was in the ship's office, I was always called on duties like going out to dynamite, for example. We had a lot of dynamite. That's the reason we could blow up the ship. We had so much dynamite. But you'd have these coral reefs. Maybe the chart they had was dated 1898 or something like that. So we did a new survey there, and we'd go around, and if you had things that need, so I got the chance to go out and work aboard the boats and do things like that. In other words, it wasn't all paperwork. And so anyway, the Bora Bora was a great experience. And then we went all through the South Seas. You name it. There's not a single island that we missed. Tonga, Fiji, American Samoa, British Samoa, the Hebrides, New Caledonia, well, all of them. See, Wallis Island, which was an island I've never heard of much since, but it's so we got we just had a tour of the South Seas. Now, it wasn't all peaches and cream, because anytime you were at sea, they always had this 4 hours in the morning and 4 hours at night because of that. And even when you were in port, they had you on watch duty on a rotating basis, like almost like 8 on and 4 off or something like that. So they managed to keep you all fagged out, you see. But the only time we did have a little baseball, or they'd go to the bars, there'd be some bars there, and then we'd have fights, and we'd have to bring, one of my jobs was bringing people back from the fight. I had one guy come up to me later, and I didn't remember the incident at all. He said, "Thank God you got me back aboard the ship." Well, I didn't want anybody to get over. It's pretty serious when you're over time, when you're in war, you see.
Well, tell me about playing baseball.
Well,
a good baseball player?
Yeah. Well, I was good enough for softball. It was just something to do. In other words, those were your two choices, with baseball or the bar. And you know, I tried to make it the bar, but I didn't get it all the time. Well, you were so limited. I mean, you'd always be restricted. You never did have too much fun. You know what I'm saying? You could have a little fun, but not a lot of fun. And so we just moved around all over the South Pacific. In fact, the greatest, well, I guess one thing I did do, I did see that, no, that was coming back, was then my real break occurred. See, I had been turned down for a commission because of astigmatism in my right eye. The theory being if you're an officer, you need 20/20 eyesight. Well, that's a farce. You don't. Because I had crow's nest watch here, and I had just the same kind of sight I got now. So I was the most critical person aboard as far as lookout was concerned. But we finally got to Australia. And you talk about going to heaven, little Lord. See, those sunsets in the south, down in the southern hemisphere, were absolutely fantastic. You know, that French painter, Gauguin, or whatever his name was, he settled in the side of the island just to paint down there because they got colors down there you've never seen before. And those sunsets were awesome. Well, they had one of those when we were going into Sydney, Australia. And here I was in the crow's nest watch, drinking in this beautiful sight and going to get off that ship. See, I was on that ship for a year and a half, see. So we never did spend the night off the ship because they didn't know what might happen on the beach. So anyway, we got to Australia, and we actually got Liberty that night. I couldn't believe it because usually they find some excuse to put it off for another day or so. So anyway, I got a chance to see Australia. Well, then I got my biggest break there was because we had one more yeoman aboard ship than our allowance called for. And because that was MacArthur's headquarters, at that time I think MacArthur was in Brisbane, but the Sydney was kind of the administrative. So they sent a thing over, they wanted a yeoman to be transferred. So they put me up. Didn't make me mad at all. I think they thought they were getting rid of me, which they were. But boy, I never was so happy to have somebody get rid of me as going ashore there. Because once I got there, then I went up to Brisbane, and I spent a year there.
All right, so tell me when are you arriving in Australia? What time of year? And
well, it was around early in like January, February. Of
43?
43, yeah.
Okay.
See, we spent all of 42 at sea.
Okay.
And then 43 was coming up. So then I get to Australia, and I get transferred to the, at that time they called Com Southwest Pac 4, and later on became 7th Fleet. And and it was MacArthur's Navy, really. See, we were in the same headquarters when I went from Sydney up to Brisbane. I was in the same office building with it. I lived in a hotel in Brisbane. It beat that ship, I guarantee. And the nice thing about it in Australia, it's customary if you're in a hotel, they give you your breakfast, and I was on a per diem of some kind. So here I got a free breakfast from the hotel. I had the per diem, for the rest of it. So I'm telling you, it was quite the life after what I'd gone through. I thought, well, maybe I've lived to deserve this. And I could see MacArthur almost every day because he would come down and go out in his limo to go to eat lunch at the hotel there, the Lennon's Hotel there in Brisbane, and all the local folks would gather around, to see him, and all I had to do was look out the window because we were in the same building. We were sort of under his control.
You said he would have lunch at the Lennon. Is that
Lennon's? Well, that was a hotel in Brisbane.
Can you spell that? Can you spell
Lennons? Yeah, Lennon's. MacArthur. The word was MacArthur had a suite. His wife had a suite. His son had a suite, and the Chinese woman that looked after the son, she had a suite. He was living high on the hog, which you'd expect. Of course, I admired MacArthur more afterwards at the time because at that time there was so much, friction between the Army and Navy. If you were a good Navy man, you were supposed to boo him, you know what I'm saying? But I thought he was a great man then, and I still do. But so I think he was entitled to whatever he got. But so he ran that show, and I was in the officer personnel, which meant that all the people who came into the States, came into the 7th Fleet from the States, had to come through our office. All the officers did. So that kind of gave you a touch. See, I saw all kinds of people, like Admiral Byrd, and I had a lot of them. I saw Henry Fonda. I had almost a list of people that were famous that were in the Navy, you know, for the purpose. So it was it was an interesting place to be.
Well, tell us what, as personnel officer, your daily chores were.
Well, to keep track of orders. So you had these people pouring in there. The orders had to be endorsed. You had to keep records. You had to post records to see, well, where are they going to go? Sometimes they'd even give you you'd have to place them somewhere. Like, well, here's a unit over here that needs this, so we sent it over there. You took on some of those at that level, you see. So it was paperwork, and it wasn't too bad. I mean, it beats standing on that deck of that ship, letting your life be controlled by the bosun's pipe, because I didn't have to have a bosun's pipe. So by that time, I had learned a whole lot in the Navy. I was getting real smart. I was a lot smarter than I was when I went in. And one of the ways I found out, because when you go in, you're just think everybody's going to look after you. Of course, nobody looks after you. You find that out real quick. So anyway, the officer in charge wanted to recommend me for being an officer. And I said, well, I've already had that happen one time, and it fell down because of the physical. But in the meantime, the war had progressed, and they got to the point where they were changing a lot of requirements. And so I thought maybe they'd change the physical. But anyway, I went ahead. Oh yeah, then you had this, in the Navy, the naval is more class conscious than the Army, see, because it's dominated more by academy people than the Army's in West Point dominate. So the last thing in the world, a lot of those naval officers want to see a young enlisted guy become an officer. But anyway, this guy stood behind me. See, by that time, I'd had a college degree and spent a year at Columbia University. So I had the educational background, and maybe more than what they had, you see. But anyway, by that time, I knew how to handle the Navy system. See, that was your key thing, was your knowledge. Like they were always losing things in the file, you see. So he's finally said, well, Bill, he said, you're the only one that can find anything in the file, so we'll recommend you. So anyway, I finally got recommended for a commission. Oh yeah, and I had a friend in the Navy Department too. That was another break, which is almost another story, because he found that old application that had been sidetracked earlier, and this was a new one, you see. And so then I go back to the States and finally got my commission, and then I volunteered to come back to that same command, because I knew that command pretty well. So I wasn't gone more than about 2 or 3 months. When I walked in there, they said, oh, by God, we're glad you're back. We've been trying to find this file over there.
Right, so you were there for a year. So for 1943, you were
yeah, all of 43
and then when did
into 44. So it was 44.
So what are the couple of months that you
I went to naval training in Arizona. See, I knew a lot about the Navy, but technically they want you to go to officers training, to learn how to do this and do that. So I spent 2 months in Tucson, Arizona at the Naval School there. So by coming back from overseas, going there 2 months, and then another month, so I was in the States. See, I was overseas 50 months during the war.
Yeah.
It was only 44 months overseas. No, how was that? 50 months on active duty, 44 months overseas. So there were just a few months before and after that I was not overseas. I was usually aboard ship. So anyway, I went back to that same command that I'd been recommended, and I could immediately put me to work as an officer because I knew where the files were. And then later on, this was a break that occurred, the real break, was that north of New Guinea, there's some islands called the Admiralty Islands. A lot of people haven't ever heard of it. And Manus is a key base on that. It was a huge base, had a great harbor, and they used it as a great, for the invasion of the Philippines. So they had set up a subordinate command there. So then I could go there and be the personnel officer. See, otherwise, before that, I was always working for some other personnel officer. So we had charge of bases like Milne Bay, Moresby, Finchhaven, whatever, just name all those bases in New Guinea and northern Australia. So that was probably the best arrangement I ever had, because the admiral there, you really got to know everybody. In fact, that's where I met Irving Berlin. He was flying around doing the USO things, but you couldn't talk to him. He sat with the admiral and had his meals, but we all had. So it was pretty good. It was a huge base.
All right, you've mentioned this admiral. What was his name? Do you remember that?
Well, the first one was named Boak, Admiral Boak. And Admiral Boak was a
How do you
tough,
spell that?
B-O-A-K.
Okay.
And he was one more tough hombre. Boy, I guarantee you, when you walked into his presence, you trembled. So Boak was in charge. Well, he was the one that really had established that base. So they went out there when it was nothing. And I've heard all the stories about, how he might got everybody whipped into shape, because he was a worker. He was a worker. In fact, he built it up and got the Legion of Merit, I think, for that. Well, then he left, and he had a real Southern gentleman come on. And I can't think of his name for the
That's
moment.
okay.
But the main thing I learned from him was to drink martinis. His test, if you were going to measure up, well, you had to be able to stand so many martinis. And unfortunately, we had a legal officer who couldn't hold his liquor, so we had to get another.
What kind of martinis?
Well, any kind.
Any kind.
Oh, listen, he had a guy there that they'd give it to you. Listen, I could have my eggs in the morning any way I wanted it. We had a Pullman porter chef. You see, in the old days, the best food you ever ate was on the trains, Pullman train. And this guy, he could do anything. I'm telling you, the guy was awesome. So you could have your eggs the way you wanted it. And if you wanted a martini, if you wanted it dry, however you wanted it, he could do it for you. And and I'll think of this guy's name in a few minutes probably, but he was just from South Carolina, and God, he was just a perfect gentleman. We couldn't have asked. The first guy, Boat, his idea of recreation was horseshoe pitching. So you had to learn how to horseshoe pitch. Get along with him. Martin, that's what it was, Commodore Martin. See, they were Commodores. The rank Commodore is just sort of between captain and admiral. It's just kind of an honorary. So they were Commodores, sort of a rear admiral, I guess. And so, but anyway, that between Volk and Martin, Commodore Martin, it turned out it was a well-run, well-operated base. Big base, we had everything. We had airfields, we had labor battalions, we had whatever. And I guess I almost hate to tell you this, but at noontime, because of in the Navy, a lot of things, and he'll find this out, is cumshaw. See, you get in a position where you can do something for somebody, they do something for you. So we could get a boat every day. See, down there, you have the reins, but every day at noontime, the boat would meet at the dock. We'd have the food aboard, right out there, and play volleyball.
It's a little different at the end of
It was a little bit, it was almost, I don't know how worse it could get. And I had this multimillionaire friend of mine who I had known, I knew his friend of his who had come to for a court martial, and he managed to, well, he didn't win the court martial, but it wasn't him, he was the plaintiff. But anyway, he and I got to be good friends, and so we used to, he was big, this guy was a lot older than I was, but because his whole life was nothing but just having a good time. so we had a lot of fun. And
where were you when the atomic bombs were dropped?
Well, we were at Manus. We were at Manus Island, and this Commodore Martin, he took that very seriously. In fact, he called, all of the part of the camp. It was a huge place, so maybe he just called together the group that was with us. And he said, well, it looked to him like wars were going to end. There weren't going to be any more wars. That was kind of his message, because I guess the impact had been that the atomic bomb had done its duty and did what we needed to be done, because we would never have survived. I mean, that Japan, they'd have fought individual by individual. They said they had already figured it'd take 1 million men to conquer Japan with everything best. So I want to give Truman all the credit in the world for dropping that atomic bomb, because it's the stupidest thing in the world for us to go on fighting that war when, the situation like it was.
And then how did you hear about the surrender?
Well, that's when this lawyer got so drunk. He was from Boston. I don't know if y'all know any Boston Irish. I'd heard the story, about people getting down where their chin was on the foot rail, and I always thought it was just a fiction. They had a bunch of Boston Irish. They actually, one of them the legal officer ended up down on the floor with his chin on the foot rail. So, and then one of the other ones was going to beat up on him because of it, and so on and so forth. So the Commodore told me, he said, let me see who else is a lawyer on the staff. See, we had all kinds of people available, for anything. So they bumped him, they ran him off. He was a Harvard graduate too, by the way, but he thought he was supposed to, they think they're supposed to let everything out, you see, because there was VJ Day. That's what we were celebrating, was VJ Day. Because we went on through VE Day, but then VJ Day was the really only important day for us, because we were in the Pacific. We weren't over there in the Atlantic. So VJ Day was our big day. So then my challenge got to be, how was I going to get back to the States, because I was still single. And the point system that came out favored the married men, you see. And so here I'd been overseas 4 years, and I rated way down here because I was still single. Of course, later on they changed that, and the Commodore also said I had to get somebody that was good as I was. And I said, well, I'm only one, but I did find two guys, picked two guys to take my job, so he was satisfied with that. So he released me to come back. So.
And when were you released?
Well, that was in November of 45.
Okay.
Yeah, one interesting thing that happened while I came back to the States originally was I was on the train. I don't know if you've ever been to the West Coast, right up and down between L.A. and San Francisco. Have you ever ridden that train? It has club cars and all that. But I met the president of Standard Brands on that train, and it turned out that he had been an enlisted man in World War I, and he'd gotten to be an officer, and he was interested in me for that reason, because he knew that it's not easy to do in the Army, and it's real hard to do in the Navy. So he took a little interest in me, so we got talking, and we found out, lo and behold, my hometown of Dallas, Texas, the man whose pool I learned how to swim in Dallas, George Aldridge, was a director of Standard Brands. So, and so happens George Aldridge voted with Jim Adams, who was president of Standard Brand. So he said, well, he gave me his card. He said, well, when you get back, he said, come look us up. And I went to see Mr. Aldridge, and he said, well, go on up there. He said, they'll do something for you, So that's where I just stepped into a job, you might say, when the war was over. And all of that helped, you see, my Navy experience, the fact that I'd been enlisted and then became an officer, and all that kind of stuff kind of helped the cause.
Well, it's a wonderful story. Tell me about, so you come back and you take a job in Dallas with Standard Brands?
No, I went to New York.
Oh,
I went to New York, and they asked me whether I wanted to be assigned. I had a choice between Birmingham and Atlanta. Well, I picked Atlanta. So apparently they had openings theoretically on both. So that's what got me down to Atlanta. And then, see, early in the game, here's the most momentous in my life, was when I went to Miami and I met my wife, Wilma.
Tell me her name.
Wilma.
What was her maiden name?
Lockhart. Wilma Lockhart. Yeah,
when did you meet her? When is this?
Well, this was about November. About September of. I got out in 45, so this would have been about 46. I was released.
September of 46?
About 46, I met her down there in Miami. And
how did you meet Wilma?
Well, it was a club. See, I had a roommate who went to this club. It was for journalists, the man that ran this place was catering to the media, so he had what he called the press club. And all these, they'd go there and they'd feel like, you know, they were special, you see. So Wilma came with her sister's roommate who wrote for the Miami Herald. And so Wilma showed up and I showed up. And Wilma, she pulled one on me that when we got up to dance, Wilma swoons. And I thought, my God, what's wrong with this lady? And so, but she just could barely say it. It was because of me. She couldn't take it. It was too much. Well, I had never had that, you know, tried on me before. And I took
you
it.
hadn't elicited that sort of from a woman
I
who hadn't swooned on you?
Right, I never had. I went for a hook, line, and sinker. I said, this girl thinks I'm wonderful, and she's willing to say it. She's the kind of a girl I've always dreamed about. She was really a fulfillment of my dreams, and just exactly the kind of girl I dreamed about. And here she is in my... So she hooked me. She couldn't have gotten rid of me with a stick at that point, because she did it so well. She's real talented on that. So we've been married for 57 years, I guess, something like that. But I was very fortunate. I just lucked out. You know, those things you just you
So
don't
is
know.
that what you call love at first sight?
Yeah, it was
Swoon
love,
at
as far as
first
I'm
sight?
concerned, it was love at first sight.
When did you all get married?
Well, about a year later. We got married November 1st of 47, I think.
And you were settled in Atlanta by then?
Oh, let's see. We were, we went to, we were in Atlanta by that time, yeah. Married down there and then settled in Atlanta. I think we can't remember.
Or was that Raleigh?
Huh?
Raleigh, North Carolina?
Oh, that's right. We lived in Raleigh first, and then went to Atlanta from Raleigh. I was working with Standard Brands, and they finally moved me down to Atlanta out of Raleigh. And once I got to Atlanta, I knew I'd never leave because you could invest in real estate. See, Wilma's father knew a thing or two about real estate, and he sort of helped me out with ideas. So I stayed with in Atlanta. I thought, well, I'm not going to leave Atlanta no matter what, because we've had some degree of success on real estate.
I need to, I'm going to stop the tape for just a minute.
What about the appointment?
We had to reset the tape player, and so we're going to start recording again. Mimi, you had something that you wanted your dad to include?
Well, this was back on December 7th, about when he would always tell the story that when he would look and see the ships, the bombs going and the ships burning, you know, what he could hear, which was...
Well, I didn't hear very much. It was real funny the way the noise was. It went the other way. I don't know whether the wind was blowing the other way or not, but I could see all this pandemonium, but couldn't hear a lot of it. I mean, it was just where we were situated. We could see it, but we couldn't hear it, you know. And that's it's kind of a screwy thing, you know. All of a sudden, you wonder, is my hearing aid working or something?
Makes it surreal.
But
Yes. He always would say that it was surreal for that reason.
yeah, it really was. You know, you felt like you were witnessing. You were just watching a silent movie. I guess is what it was.
We've got just a few minutes left. Is there any part of the story that you haven't told that you would like to tell? Can you think of anything? Is there a person that you remember? Is there an event? You've told us several events. Just didn't know. Wanted to make sure that we got all that you remember.
Yeah, on December 7th, or
At anything. At anything.
Yeah, this is Bailey. The thing about the apartment.
Oh yeah, the way after Will and I met each other, in order to get an apartment, to show you what happens when a war goes on, housing just dries up. And I was in Orlando. I'd been transferred from Miami to Orlando. That's when I knew God was directing me. When I meet her in Miami, then I'm transferred to Orlando, and she only lives 50 miles away, you see. So I was looking for a place to live, and I found out real quick that they would not lease out to any single people. So I had to lie. Said my wife was going to join me and put Mr. and Mrs. Brotherton. So when Wilma came around checking on me ahead of time, she looked at that and says, she had a friend with her. Apparently her friend was sophisticated enough to say, oh, he probably did that just to get the room. I mean, she figures that, which was correct, of course. But Wilma acted real serious, like, well, wait a minute now, are you or are you not? You see? And I said, well, you know, it's kind of a common story that people tell in order to get in a place. And I felt, well, I was a responsible person. What they wanted to do was keep the single people out. We're going to do all the partying and hell raising and so on. And I knew that I would respect their property, so I felt qualified to qualify myself, you know. And so that was a little bit of a break I got by being able to live there in Orlando, and she was down in Haines City, and we were able to visit back and forth until they get ready to transfer me again. It was fate again. And so by that time I'd made up my mind, and she'd even gone back to Texas with me and met my family, and I'd even bought her a ring. Wilma wanted to skip the engagement ring. She said, I don't care about the engagement, I want the wedding ring. to heck with all the frills, I want the bottom line. So I went ahead and got the wedding ring, and so then we were married there in Haines City, where she lives and so forth.
This is Mimi. Dad, you might want to, because you didn't do really any background, and I don't know how much you want to do, but you might, I think it's interesting about you living with your Uncle Dick in New York in the 1928, the World's Fair there, and some of the things you saw, and how he worked with Madame Curie, and you lived with him at Purdue. And you know.
Yeah, what she's talking about there is in my early years, I had an aunt who married a famous man, international scientist, called Dr. Richard Bishop Moore. And he had a lot of claims to fame. One of them was that he worked with Madame Curie on radium. And he worked with somebody, sir, that was big in helium. So he was the radium and helium expert in the United States. And so my grandmother and I went and spent the summer in New York. I got to know New York like a book. You see, that was because when you're young, you take everything in. New York, you know, is well organized, streets and all that kind of thing. So she and I, we were in that Metropolitan Museum of Art 100 times, Museum of Natural History, everything you could see in New York. That was when the Woolworth Building was the tallest building in the world.
And when was this? What year?
It was in 1926. And so that was a big step in education, because they say travel is broadening, and it all of a sudden, and then whenever I was away from New York, I could start talking about New York and get people's attention. Somebody would say, oh, shut up, I've heard that before. But that was quite an experience that I had there, and I lived with them for 2 years. See, my mother had 3 sons, boys, and my aunt, who married Dr. Moore, didn't have any children, so they wanted me to live with them, you know, to give my mother a break and to kind of have, you know, another member of the family. So living there with him at Purdue, he was dean of the science school and head of the chemistry department. And he, with all of his connections with Madame Curie, he was going to build well, they did build a chemistry building. He wanted to get her to come and dedicate it. And I think she did get to the Midwest, but I don't think she ever actually got to West Lafayette. But, you know, Madame Curie was quite of a character herself. But he had all this prestige because he'd been head of some of the several big companies, but he was like everybody else. He wanted to get out of the commercial rat race back into the academic because
What company was he president of?
the biggest chemical company.
Dow?
Dow. He was president of Dow Chemical Company for a while, and but he wanted to get out of that and get back into academics because that's where, see, he was a research guy. When people can do research, they're the ones that, got all the marbles. And the man that was president of Purdue had sought him out for that reason because he knew that he would bring a lot of prestige to Purdue because of his research.
And also when the president was ill.
Yeah, well, when he was there, he was the highest ranking faculty person. So when the president was out, well, Dr. Moore took his place. And you'd have famous people come to town, like the German that ran in the First World War, sank tons and tons of shipping, but nobody lost their life. He was one of these Prussian elite people, but he didn't believe in killing people. He just sank the ship. I remember he came through there. He was big on the circuit, and he was really, it was quite an experience. Just to talk to somebody like that.
Also in 1928, you stayed with them with Uncle Dick, and you saw Gertrude Ederle, who swam.
Well, that summer of 26 when I was in. I didn't actually see her. The summer of 26 is the year that Gertrude Ederle, first woman to swim the English Channel, and then later Lindbergh came along. But I was sort of there at a time when a lot of things were happening. In fact, it was the Tunney Dempsey fights, the long count, the long count. Uh-huh. And we back then, of course, we hadn't have TV. We listened to it on the radio, And so I was sort of in New York at the time. Oh yeah, when the movies, the speaking movies, came on that summer. I remember the first one where it was a silent all the way, and then at the end, they brought in the voice. See, that was the big breakthrough on that.
Al Jolson.
Yeah, Al Jolson and so forth. So I was there in a real critical time. So when I went back to Columbia later, after I finished SMU, I got a scholarship to Columbia to see if I could get into the law, and I found out that I didn't have a legal mind. And I felt real bad about it until I found out that my best friend, John, who just left here earlier, knows about him, Dan Smoot, and I've told him about this fellow Dan Smoot, a friend of mine. He was brilliant, and he got a scholarship to SMU, but after he'd been in it for 90 days, he gave it back because he said, in his opinion, law was not an honorable profession. I mean, here's this pipsqueak giving the dean of the law school, just telling him, take it, and he had the integrity. See, he had the brilliance, but somebody with integrity like him.
What I want to do is finish up. You have your a large contingent of your family here today. Would you tell us who was in the room with us so that it's on the tape?
Well, unfortunately, my son is not here because he was deceased due to an accident. And
what was your son's name?
Yeah, Wilson.
Okay.
Wilson Lockhart. It was a great tragedy in my life.
All right. And who is here with us?
Then the number 2 child is Mimi, Georgia Marie Brotherton, better known as Mimi, and she's married a fine young man named William Davis Stead. And then number 3 daughter was Bailey Ann Brotherton, who married a young man, McKay, Steve McKay, and Philip McKay, Samuel McKay. They have two boys.
2 boys.
And,
2 boys, one of whom is with us today.
And one of him, and he's going in the Navy.
Who's with us today?
Well, Mimi is here today.
I'm sorry, the grandson that's going into
Grandson,
the
one going in the Navy. That's Samuel McKay. And he's all signed up and everything. He's going on active duty in July, I believe. So I thought you might appreciate this kind of tell how the old guy did it. See,
And you have another grandson in the room with
and I have
us.
another grandson, William Davis Stitt.
Oh,
And-
Davis Brotherton.
Oh, yeah, William. Wait a minute.
It's William Davis.
So wait a minute. William Brotherton. What is?
Davis, he's
William
William,
Davis.
William Davis Stitt, and he's Davis Brotherton.
Oh, he's Davis' brother. Yeah, I got my name on him in the middle. And Samuel, didn't I get my name on you in some way?
William Samuel.
William Samuel.
William Samuel. Okay, so those two are named, my name is incorporated in those two young men. See?
How many grandchildren do you have?
Well, we have 5 now,
5.
minus the one that was deceased, but 5 surviving.
You have Laura.
Well, there's
Helen.
my first one, my son's surviving spouse has a daughter surviving. A terrible thing there. Not only my son was deceased, but his son is deceased. So I lost both the son
Blake.
and a
Blake
grandson.
Lockhart Brotherton.
And he's
Blake Lockhart Brotherton.
Blake Lockhart. And Blake is deceased, and Laura is living, and she's surviving with her mother, and we don't have any relations with her.
And she's Laura Helen Brotherton.
Laura Brotherton. Laura Brotherton, yeah. Yeah, we don't have any relations with her at all.
All right, and then there's another guest in the room with us. Who
Oh, man,
brought you today?
this is the prize guy, Tom Bauer. Tom is, well, everybody in Gainesville knows who Tom's a wonderful man. He's made a trip down here, drove me down here today, and he's going to drive me back. Now, if you know anybody that can do any more than that, I don't know. But Tom, tell him how good you are. When we were coming down the street here, he has service stations up and down the road here that he supplies with oil. You see, he's a service, and he does. Some you just give them oil, and some of them you do the whole 9 yards or something. But I tell you, this man needs special recognition.
Well, thank you all
Can
very
I ask
much.
him to interject something? Bill, tell them why they didn't blow up the fuel tanks until we're not going to Jackson till the third wave. I always thought that was it.
Well, I think the reason they didn't blow them up was because they wanted to get out of there. See, time got real important all of a sudden there. They didn't know where our carriers were. If they had some way of knowing where our carriers were, and the carriers were a long ways off, I think they'd hit the fuel tanks. But because they had had so much success, you see, like only losing 29 planes, and look at all the damage they had done, and as far as the Admiral was concerned, his goal was to disable the battleships, and he did. Every one of them was disabled in some way or another. Some of them were later, but at the time, none of them were effective. So he thought, well, what the heck? Why should I risk, in an encounter with the U.S. Carriers? Because if they show up, they're not going to like what they see, and they might sink those carriers that would go carry their planes back. So I think that's what got him out. Was that what
You were saying that they didn't want to blow them up because the smoke would go over and cover the target.
Oh, I said, well, the question was, see, I wondered why they had not hit earlier. Well, you see, what happens, whenever you do a fuel tank, all of a sudden you got black smoke galore, and you can't find your way out of it. So the tradition is always, if your fuel tank's involved, you're going to hit them last. And because they had a 3-phase plan, they had them there. Well, of course, we had no way of knowing that. And I just wondered, why they hadn't hit them. I mean, my first war, I thought, well, you just hit everything, So that blanks you out. So there's a darn good reason for not hitting them first, because then that almost ends the attack, because you can't see anything, nobody else can, because those tanks put out this tremendous smoke.
Mr. Brotherton, I want to thank you so much for coming in and sharing the story. It makes a huge difference to us. So thank you for taking the time.
Yeah.
We do appreciate it.
Well, you're too generous. I don't know how I could